Hi, and welcome to No Watts Cooking, where we're changing the world one recipe at a time with a splash of physics. And today we're changing the world with a glass of sweet tea. In the southern Appalachian Mountains where I live, sweet tea is a non-negotiable element of almost any of our social gatherings, whether it's a potluck or a picnic or you're having friends over. There's almost always a pitcher of sweet tea. And historically, this has been great because all we transported were these dry tea leaves, right? Very low transportation energy and a bunch of sugar, yes, but we added the bulk of the weight from our tap water in our kitchen, which then also eliminated the need for single-use plastic. Sure, at some point somebody decided to put the tea in a bag and add a string and add a tag and put it in a cardboard box, which then we wrap in a shrink wrap plastic. But even considering all that, when compared to the other beverages we commonly consume, tea, either hot or cold, is one of the lowest in transportation energy and also single-use packaging, which is brilliant. Until the people that sold those tea leaves said, wait a second, I have a brilliant idea. We can get a lot more profit out of these tea leaves if we just add water to them first, and some sugar and some flavoring. And so that's exactly what they did. And now, right, you have this incredible ability to buy tea already made and pre-packaged, which now adds incredible transportation weight and also now necessitates that we have single-use packaging. Never about perfection. Clearly, I bought one of these, which is why I had it in my house. But if it's the exception rather than the rule, I think we're moving in the right direction. So what we're going to do today is come up with a strategy where you can throw together this iced tea concentrate that you can just kind of have in your refrigerator on the ready, and then it reduces your need to buy the pre-made packaged alternative. So before we get into the recipe, we're going to talk a little bit about the physics because the whole world is sweeter when we understand the physics. And what we're going to focus on today is specific heat. Specific heat is a property of a substance that's a measure of its thermal sluggishness. In other words, how quickly does it change temperature when we add or subtract heat from it? And so if we look at the metals we use in the kitchen, like stainless steel and copper, their specific heat is right around 400 joules per kilogram degrees Celsius. Now I'm using the SI units there. If you're using English units, it would be BTUs per pound degree Fahrenheit. That's not that important. What's important is to think about those units. It's energy per mass per temperature, right? So the units are pretty intuitive to show what it means. And again, stainless steel and copper, right around 400 joules per kilogram degree Celsius. If we look at rocks, I know we don't use rocks in the kitchen, but it's a good reference point. They're about 800 joules per kilogram degree Celsius. So about twice as much as copper, for example. In other words, you'd have to add twice as much energy to the same mass of rocks to change its temperature by the same amount as compared to copper. If we shift our attention to some of the liquids we use in the kitchen, like say olive oil, for example, olive oil has a specific heat right around 2,000 joules per kilogram degree Celsius. So much more sluggish, takes a lot more energy to change its temperature. But now if we shift our focus to water, which happens to be the substance we thermodynamically manipulate in the kitchen the most, water specific heat is over 4,000 joules per kilogram degree Celsius, literally off the charts from anything else that we deal with in the kitchen, right? And so it's really important that we're mindful of this and that we then are really conscious about heating as little water as possible. That's a huge energy savings because water is so energy hungry. This is true whether we're making tea or if we're making pasta or so many of the other things we do. You'll hear about specific heat a lot in this series because I think it's one of the things we really have to get right. So in light of that, we're going to make here concentrate for a ½ gallon of iced tea, and there's 8 cups in a ½ gallon. But rather than heating the full 8 cups, we're only going to heat 1/3 of that. So we're going to heat 2 2/3 cup of water. That right off the bat reduces our energy consumption by 1/3, which is brilliant. We're going to go ahead and heat this in an electric kettle. So what is the most energy efficient way to heat water, you ask? I'm so glad you asked. It ends up from the research that I've taken. Now we're only going to focus on electricity here. When we start talking about gas, it gets more complicated. We'll talk about that in another video. But only talking about electricity, we could use electric resistance, an electric radiant, we could use a microwave, we could use an induction cooktop, or we can use a standalone electric kettle. And it ends up that the electric kettle is actually the most efficient way to boil water. It's basically because there's no losses. We basically take an electric resistance burner and stick it up inside the water. So all the electric energy that made it to that resistor then makes it into the water. It doesn't have anywhere else to go. I will note that induction cooktops are very close behind. They're also very efficient. So while that water's boiling, I'm going to go ahead and get the concentrate all ready. I'm going to use 2 family size tea bags for this. And then also I like to add 1 single bag of mint tea. So I think the kitchen is this great creative space. It's a maker space, and so I encourage you to experiment with different flavors and see what kind of mixture of teas you enjoy most in your iced tea. Also, a quart mason jar to me is the perfect storage vessel for this iced tea concentrate. I use mason jars for probably 80% of my food storage needs, whether that's in the freezer, in the pantry, in the refrigerator. They're just really great. So that's it. We're just going to put, we are going to go ahead and put sugar in this jar too. And so I like my iced tea really mildly sweet. So I only use about 1/4 cup of sugar. In the South, the sweet tea recipes really call for more like a cup of sugar or more even for 1/2 gallon of tea. So just make it however you're most, that you enjoy it the most, but just make sure you remember to put all the sugar in this concentrate that you would be adding to the full 1/2 gallon of tea. So I'm going to add that 1/4 cup of sugar. While we're waiting for the water to boil, the other point I want to make is that when we make tea like this, rather than buying it in the pre-made form, it's a huge cost savings as well. The last time I was in the grocery store, I took a quick scan of tea bag costs versus pre-made tea costs, and it's about 10 times more expensive to buy iced tea in the jug pre-made as it is to buy it in the tea leaves on average. And so this is also a great cost savings in addition to an energy and packaging savings. All right, it takes about 0.06 kilowatt hours to boil 2 2/3 cup of water in my electric kettle. So if we move the decimal point, that's about 60 watt hours. It's about the same energy as burning a 60-watt incandescent bulb for 1 hour, for example. So right off the bat, we've cut that because we only heated 1/3 of the water we needed for the first full 1/2 gallon. All right, so there's our water. Our sugar's already in there. I'm going to go ahead and give the sugar a quick stirring to make sure it all dissolves while the water is nice and hot. There we go. Simple as that. And then I'm just going to add these 3 tea bags. And put a lid on it. That's as complicated as this recipe gets, right? So we're just going to let this sit. I'd let it steep for about 15 minutes to let all that tea infuse into the water. It ends up that tea is really water soluble, which is why this strategy works so well. The tea bags don't need the full 1/2 gallon of boiling water to infuse all their flavor. About 1/3 of it is sufficient, and so then we've saved a bunch of energy. So if you want to use this immediately and make a full 1/2 gallon, once the 15-minute steep time is over, I would then pour this into a 1/2 gallon pitcher, the whole quantity here, and then add the rest of tap water and a little bit of ice to get it up to drinking temperature. It's another cost savings of this strategy is that if you're eating it immediately, drinking it immediately, you don't have to add nearly as much ice as if you heated the full 1/2 gallon, right? And ice isn't free energy either. We take water at tap temperature, and put it in the freezer, and so then we have to run that freezer to extract the thermal energy from that water to convert it from the liquid to the solid ice form. And so that's another way that we're saving energy with this strategy. If you're not going to make it immediately, I would just leave this on the counter till it comes to room temperature and then stick it in the refrigerator. And then you sort of have iced tea on the ready. If you want to make it by the glass, You can just pour any size glass, make it about 1/3 with this concentrate, and then fill the other 2/3 with tap water and ice. It's also a great strategy when you're heading out the door. Rather than stopping and grabbing a tea in a bottle already made, you can just grab a multiple use water bottle, fill it 1/3 with the concentrate and 2/3 with water and ice, and you're on your way. So that's it. Sweet tea is an example of food physics at its sweetest. I'm Carla Ramsdell, and I really believe in the power of our food system to heal us and to heal our planet. Please subscribe so you too can become part of the food physics movement, where we're learning how to change the world with delicious recipes. Thanks. Add water to the tea leaves. We just have to add water. Waiting for the phone to stop ringing. It's because the whole world is brighter. It's not brighter. You can just grab a multiple use water bottle.